Today we're making sloppy joes, and this is your ingredient list. Karl has already gotten started. And how much meat do you have in there?
This is exactly 2 pounds.
Of what cut?
Ground chuck. And what I've done is I started this a few minutes ago. You don't want to chop it up too fine because you can actually over chop up ground beef and it turns kind of like fine ground beef. You don't want that. You don't need any oil or fat or browning medium. There's fat in the beef and there's water, and this is cooking on medium. On a gas stove it comes up pretty quick. The pans heat up quicker and it starts to cook much quicker. I'm just doing a little bit of chopping some of the big pieces. You know, but you could get crazy with it, but you don't want to do that. Alright, so I've turned it down from medium to low, a little high-low. It's all fully cooked, but it doesn't have to be brown. Or, you know, toasted brownie brown. So that's what we got. So far I've added no salt, no pepper, no anything. Because 2 of the ingredients on our list have a fair amount of salt. There's a good chance you won't need to salt it at all. But the mustard and the Worcestershire sauce are pretty salty. So I like salt, and I don't usually feel the need to add salt after I make it. So first thing we want to do is, this is cooked thorough. It's on kind of a medium-low thing. And I spread it out. The reason I spread it out is because it helps me gauge how much stuff to do, because I don't measure for this particular recipe. All I do is open my ketchup and I start to put it on there, and I put it on where it's pretty much covering the if you want to err on the side of caution and put too much ketchup, not too little. And if you kind of look at this, it's pretty much covered, like you can see more ketchup than beef. Does that make sense? And like I said, if there's a couple of areas that look like they don't have enough, then you can go back and put it on. So and not to worry, after this is simmering, you can add more. Do a close-up on this meat. See if you kind of spread it around, it's kind of evenly. And this is about less than a ½ inch deep. 2 pounds of meat that's less than a ½ inch deep, the top completely covered. And what I do at this point is I stir it around. And look at it. Once again, this is a relatively low flame. I don't know how good the color is, but it's fairly red. And I'm looking at it, and I'm telling myself that it needs a little more ketchup. Even though the rule of thumb I told you about is a good one. To me, that looks much better. Now, the second thing I add, I usually always do this in this order. It doesn't mean you have to. Is mustard.
What's the ratio mustard to ketchup?
It's all by sight, actually, in this recipe. With mustard, you want to also once again, this is about a half-inch deep. So the ratio of mustard to meat is 2 pounds of meat, a half-inch thick. If this was full of beef to the top, then you might want to put more in it. But it's only about a half an inch deep, maybe a hair less than a half inch. So you want to basically put a fair amount in there. After I add the ingredients one by one, I always stir it. See what it looks like. And taste it. There's a little mustard that needs to get distributed through this. And sometimes along the way you can drain off grease. If you take every bit of grease out of the beef, it's not going to have as much flavor. But a lot of people feel compelled to do that. I've taken so much of the grease out, to me, I felt like it...
In the past.
In the past, yeah. I felt like it changed the flavor, not for the good. So,
I feel like it helps you.
she says if I don't drain it, it gives her indigestion.
It looks like you got a good bit out. You need to taste it.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a little taste. And I haven't even added, I still have 2 more ingredients, but I want to taste the ketchup to mustard. I like that. Now, the Worcestershire sauce. Pretty important ingredient. Once again, it's really salty, so I still haven't added any extra salt. It's sort of liberal. That was about, oh, let's see.
What is it about right there?
Yeah, it's about there. It was about a little less than a third of a bottle, and this is a 10-ounce bottle. Now this takes less time if you're actually making it, instead of making it and talking about it. So this is a pretty quick meal.
You pulling more fat out?
Just a little bit.
Okay.
Now I'm going to let that simmer for a few minutes.
That's the amount of fat that he's pulled out. When do you add the onion powder?
The onion powder will be the last thing to be added.
Okay.
I'm gonna let this simmer a little bit, and but for recipe sakes, at this point I let it simmer a little bit. Don't ask me why. It just seems to be what I've done through the years. I have my onion powder now. What do we do before there was onion powder?
I don't know.
Onion powder tastes different than onions. There's no way to make this with onions that makes it taste like it has onion powder. So onion powder gives it a distinct flavor, which you may be able to tell it's onions, but you can't get the flavor of onion powder by adding onions. Otherwise I'd add onions. It's the flavor of onion powder that I'm after here, and it's like probably the most important step. I just coat it. I dust it, coat it, and when I think I've done enough onion powder, I look at it for a minute, and I get a little more. A lot of the flavor of onion powder cooks off. What we're finally going to do is going to let this simmer a little bit, and then I'm going to do one final tasting and adjust for anything that I feel like needs a little bit more ingredient.
Pause.
Okay, it's been a few minutes. It's been simmering on low-ish, and I'm going to taste it again. I always do this. I always start off with those basic amounts. Do it by eye, and I always taste it. This will be It's
an approximate amount of time that you say it should be simmered.
I'd simmer it for 10 minutes.
Okay.
Pretty darn good.
So is that how we make sloppy joes?
That's how we make sloppy joes. I'm going to put a little bit more Worcestershire sauce in it.
Okay.
Mix it in. And I'll let it simmer. This isn't the kind of thing that you need to simmer like a stew or anything, but simmering does seem to help blend the flavors. So that's what I do. Usually this is pretty quick. It's just taking longer because I'm talking. But this is a pretty quick recipe. I always let it simmer. So I'll turn it down even lower.
And we serve it over buns or no buns if you're doing low carb, right?
That's right.
Okay.
I'm going to turn it down really low to the actual low mark on the, and let it simmer.
That's how you make sloppy joes.
That's how Karl, Opa,
GK.
GK, Grandpa Karl, let me see what else am I called? Granddad, Butthead, whatever. That's how I make sloppy joes.